All right, lovely. It's 10 o'clock, so let's make a start. Welcome, everybody. You're really warmly welcome here. I'm Lee Webster, and I am the Deputy CEO of Respect. And I'm really happy and excited to welcome you all here today for the launch of Respect's new strategy. It's really lovely to see people still joining us and popping in. Thank you. It's just my job to start with a bit of housekeeping and intros before we get on to the exciting stuff. So first thing to know is that we're recording the event and the slides will be available to everyone who signed up afterwards. This is a webinar format, so you won't be able to see everyone here. So please do introduce yourself in the chat. You can go to the chat box and maybe feel free to say what brings you here today, or if you have a particular connection to Respect and our strategy. We really love to hear from you, and I think it helps us and our panelists to know that we're in community and with friends. We do wish we could see you all in person, but I think what we've realised as we've put this event together is we're probably seeing a greater number of you than if we were in a meeting room in London that you had to travel to. We would love any feedback though on the event and the format. There'll be a link a bit later in the event with a feedback form, so we'd really appreciate it if you could fill that in. Questions are really welcome. There's a Q&A function to ask questions throughout the event, and we'll have about 10 minutes at the end to go through the most popular questions. So do also use the upvote function to vote for your favourite questions, and yeah, do feel free to add in questions. Just to note that automated captions are available for this webinar. I'm not a tech expert, but I think if you look down here, could be on there strictly at this point, you can go into the More section along the bottom toolbar and turn on automated captions. If you struggle, you can ask one of the hosts and they can help you find them. Finally, if you have any issues at all, technical or otherwise, during the event, please do message our hosts, who are Faith and Emma. They're working away in the background, and you can do that through the chat box. That's enough on logistics. We're really lucky today to be hearing from three brilliant speakers. They are people that many of you will know, and you will certainly know of their work. And I'm not going to use up our time by giving them long introductions, but just to say I could, because their CVs are really long and really full. So first up, we have Jo Todd, my boss. She's the founding CEO of Respect and has led our journey and growth over the last 2 decades. She's going to talk us through the new strategy for about 10 minutes. Then she'll be in conversation with 2 brilliant women, and we've worked closely with them and with their organisations for a long time. So we've got Andrea Simon, the director of the End Violence Against Women Coalition, and Sarah Kirkpatrick, the CEO of Welsh Women's Aid. So I will let our speakers speak for themselves. So at this point, Jo, I'll hand right over to you to talk us through the strategy.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lee. I'm just going to my notes and hopefully I can see you as well. It's very strange not being able to see the whole audience, actually, so bear with me while I just talk to my screen. I just really wanted to welcome everyone as well. It's really lovely. I've had a quick look through the participants list to see so many friends, old and new. And just to have this chance to introduce our new 5-year strategy to you all. It feels like a pivotal moment for us at Respect. We've seen huge growth and evolution over the last 23 years. And we've really taken some time to step back, take stock and build new ambitious plans. So I'm really pleased to be able to share those with you. I wanted to start with a little bit about the external environment, and you know as well as we do that the challenges we all face in the ever-changing tough landscape that we operate in just seem never-ending. It's tough at the moment. Domestic abuse isn't going away, despite our hard work and our best efforts working with many of you to put the perpetration of domestic abuse on the agenda. The response across the country just is still really piecemeal. Some areas of the country have no perpetrator service provision at all. Nationally, there is a woeful lack of services tailored to meet the needs of those from marginalised and minoritized communities. Statutory responses from policing to court to children's services to health to housing to probation, wherever you look, none of these come close to meeting the scale of the problem. Some of them don't even try. Funding is tough. The government perpetrator fund is much needed and very welcome. £36 million over 2 years. It's more than we've ever had before dedicated to responses to perpetrators. But in the face of a problem that costs £78 billion a year in England and Wales, it just barely scratches the surface. Social tolerance of domestic abuse remains alarmingly high. We see online influencers spouting dangerous messages about gender inequality and the role of women and girls. We see police violence against women and children. We see victim blaming, sexism, persistent power imbalances that enable an environment where domestic abuse can thrive. The impacts of all of this disproportionately affect minoritized and marginalized communities. And with this backdrop, we know that our work isn't done. It's time to redouble our efforts. We're proud to lead a sector that learns, develops, and breaks new ground. There are huge opportunities ahead to harness collective learning, to bring projects to scale, to build beyond traditional partnerships, and to use our voice alongside the voices of others to call for a radical shift in political will and approach towards an end to the perpetration of domestic abuse. So what we're going to do. We undertook a listening exercise that lasted quite a few months. It really was a deep dive consultation, like we've never really done before. We worked with our staff, trustees, members, partners, and allies from the sector, funders, government, parliament, academics, and beyond to hear what you appreciate about Respect, what our weaknesses are, where you see the opportunities and challenges ahead, and what you'd like to see us do. So thank you to everyone here who helped us on this part of the journey. We couldn't have done it without you, we really couldn't. So apart from that being a rather lovely affirmation of our history and role in the sector, these big picture strategic conversations have helped to shape the strategy and set our path for the next 5 years. So the strategy itself, I can't see the screen. So if you haven't already, please share the one-pager slide. So I hope you can all see what's on there. I'm going to talk you through it. So the first thing is that we've reaffirmed our main focus on perpetrators of domestic abuse, including young people. Our strand of work with male victims continues as an important project, but our main focus will be on the perpetration of domestic abuse. Our vision remains similar to the vision we had when we started over 23 years ago. We want a world where everyone is free from domestic abuse, where it's never okay to control, harm, or cause fear, where those who perpetrate domestic abuse are stopped, they're held to account, and they're given a chance to change. So for that to happen, for us to realise that vision, we've identified 3 big outcomes that we need to see happen. So firstly, a comprehensive range of specialist perpetrator responses in every local area of the country. Secondly, a state response to the perpetration of domestic abuse that actually reflects the scale, nature, and urgency of the problem. And thirdly, a wholesale shift in social attitudes leading to a reduction in domestic abuse. You can see more detail on what these outcomes look like in the longer strategy document, and there's a QR code at the end of the slides for that. So the main thing to say about those 3 outcomes is they're hugely ambitious. We can't achieve them alone. They rely on everybody playing their part across the voluntary and statutory sectors, parliamentarians, policymakers, funders, commissioners, employers, many others, working together to create big shifts in systems and in society's response to the perpetration of domestic abuse. We can't do it all, but we can have an impact by remaining focused and clear on what our contribution is. So we're going to concentrate, this is the bit you've all been waiting for, on 2 new strategic priorities, and we've tried to keep it simple and clear. So the first one is that we are going to create a Centre for Excellence, and the second is we're going to continue to deliver our programme of influence for systemic change. So the Centre for Excellence, we hope will be a high-profile flagship project which brings together practice and research, evidence and expertise to create a step change in understanding what works to end the perpetration of domestic abuse. We'll look to our members' models, projects and programmes, and beyond to international examples of good practice to collaboratively build an enhanced evidence base. We'll use our own projects, programmes and partnerships as sites of continuous learning with rigorous testing and development of new approaches. We'll prioritise filling gaps in provision and evidence, building good data and developing approaches that have the potential to not just transform the lives of individuals, but also bring about big picture systems change and have the greatest impact. We see this as a huge opportunity to collaborate and develop new partnerships in research and practice with a wide community of stakeholders, with all of you, of course, but also with employers, universities, think tanks, local authorities and government departments that we haven't reached yet. The Centre for Excellence will build on our heritage, our expertise and our journey so far, and we're determined that it will lead to improvements in practice, in innovation, and in the development and provision of high quality perpetrator responses across the UK. So if you're interested in that, please look out for more details in the coming months as we begin to shape what that will look like. If you want to discuss it with us, we're always happy to do that. So our second priority, it's building on and interrelated with the first, is the growth of our programme of influence for systemic change. So working in collaboration with those who share our passion and convictions will be ambitious as we call for an end to domestic abuse. Putting the data, evidence and best practice emerging from the Centre for Excellence at the heart of our influence work. We'll speak out clearly and boldly, using our voice and amplifying that of survivors, our members, partners and allies, in calling for the wholesale systems change needed to stop the perpetration of domestic abuse. We will build the political will at all levels to bring about this change. We'll shout loudly and relentlessly until the response to the perpetration of domestic abuse matches the scale of the problem. So that's what we want to do. I feel like taking a breath after that because it's a big, ambitious programme for us. But we also wanted to share a bit, and you can go on to the next slide if you haven't, about how we intend doing all of this. So our values are at the heart of all we do, and they're really important to all of us. They're pioneering, collaborative, accountable and respectful, and I hope you recognise them in us in the way that we work. So we know to develop our ambitious programme for change using these values, we need to look at how we work, and we've identified 5 key pillars to our approach. So first, and really importantly, we'd be nowhere without our dedicated, expert and passionate staff team and trustees. People and culture are at the heart of our strategy, and we want Respect to remain a great place to work. We're ambitious about actively embedding the principles of equity, diversity and inclusion in all areas of our work. And we were founded to address the injustice of domestic abuse and the deep inequalities underpin it. And it's a fundamental requirement of us as a domestic abuse organisation that we recognise and address power and privilege, both within our work, but also in our staff and trustee groups. And we're committed to listening, learning, challenging ourselves and improving our practice to bring about genuine change. As a membership organisation, we're both driven by our members and we also lead and support them. At the heart of our role is the knowledge that collectively we're stronger. We speak with and on behalf of our members. We challenge them and hold them to account, but they also challenge us and hold us to account. It would be a missed opportunity today to not mention the large fundraising task we've given ourselves. This really does make me pause for breath. To deliver this strategy, we need partners and funders that want to walk the path with us to help us build and shape the Centre for Excellence and develop our programme of influence. Business development and a sustainable funding path in a difficult external environment are absolutely essential to staying strong and impactful and to enable us to deliver on these bold ambitions. We believe wholeheartedly that we can do it. So if you do too and you have money, please get in touch with us. We really want to work with you. Finally, this strategy isn't just ours. We really can only begin to make an impact on the perpetration of domestic abuse if we take coordinated action built on solid relationships. The number of people who've come today to celebrate this launch with us is a wonderful testament to that. Please continue to walk with us on our journey. So that's what I wanted to say about our strategy. I hope you've found it inspirational, and I really want to hear now from our two brilliant guest speakers, Andrea and Sarah. So you've both had a preview and an opportunity to read Stopping the Harm. What are your first overall impressions of the strategy? Andrea.
I was wondering if you wanted me or Sarah to come in now, but thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, the strategy is, and you've said it, it's ambitious, but I think what you've done is you've broken it down into steps that can achieve the sort of policy and practice changes that you want to. And you want to do that with a data and an evidence-led approach, as well as influencing to try and achieve political will to really back the changes that we need to see across society in order to end violence against women and girls, domestic abuse, and that is really important. So I think it's ambitious, but you've got a plan and a path to achieve what you're setting out to. I found that it was really important for your strategy to emphasise the context that you're working in, which is very challenging, as you've said, those severe gaps in provision in perpetrator interventions that we know exist across England and Wales. It is really important to identify as your starting place. We know that the supply of those interventions can be not quality assured, they cannot be safe, and that's why Respect's quality assured perpetrator interventions need to be consistently available. And you've also highlighted that the range of specialist responses that we need to address all perpetrators do need to take account of the different risks, but also those intersecting characteristics, and the lack of provision that there is for services that are tailored to meet the needs of marginalised and minoritised groups is something that we all have to work to ensure changes. I think what I find really inspiring is the focus on systems change and how important that is in the strategy if we're going to stop perpetration of domestic abuse. It's really great to see that your objectives are underlining the need to shift public attitudes and behaviours and how vital they are if we're going to address domestic abuse. That's how at the End Violence Against Women Coalition we see prevention work as being so central, and it's important to be talking about that work in the way that you have, as challenging those systems of oppression and the power imbalances that underpin domestic abuse, and for that matter all forms of men's violence against women and girls. So that whole society approach that we'll probably talk about a bit later on is what you're saying. This isn't something that can be achieved if we work separately. We have to work collectively in order to embed and centre prevention and early intervention, and we want to see that happening with a combination of different things. Those kinds of communication campaigns, we've started to see them, but they really challenge those attitudes across society towards misogyny and what we deem acceptable behaviour, and then the community responses that really work to challenge individual perpetrator behaviour. But that critical systems change and transformation that we have to see across all institutions, including the family courts, health, our social services, and that work with younger people as well in schools, and of course the criminal justice system that is so poorly serving survivors at the moment. So it's very ambitious, but I think you have identified some really, really key things that have to happen.
Thanks, Andrea. Sarah, what were your first thoughts?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to sort of hear you capture in a nutshell what I've had the opportunity to read in advance. Slightly concerned that my notes here almost replicate your comments. So my first thoughts when I read it was that it was really clear, and it appears really simple, but it's not simple. You articulate the challenge well. And also what I found about the strategy is that it's honest. It doesn't underestimate the size of the problem, and I think that that's hugely important. Respect works across the UK, and obviously I sit here speaking from a devolved nation, so we have legislation that covers England and Wales, we have entirely different legislation in Scotland, we have a different legislative frame in Northern Ireland, but those ambitions about holding perpetrators to account, about expecting tangible change, and about working in a cohesive and coordinated way with specialist survivor services is absolutely vital. I also think the other moment of honesty, which I think was really nice from the strategy, was talking about money. Nobody likes talking about money, but this is work, and this work needs to be done effectively, and it needs to be properly funded. And I know, because I have spoken to colleagues at Respect, that one of the things that you consistently do not shy away from is not only naming that there is a cost to this work, but saying this cost must not be at the expense of survivors and survivor support services. Survivor support services are required. Methods to address perpetration are also required, and that expectation of a fully funded offer, I look forward to seeing how the Centre of Excellence articulates that, and how your ambition to influence brings that to the table every single time. So I really like it as a strategy. My 3 words are clear, simple and honest. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I mean, those are great comments, because when you're writing a strategy, you start with so many words. I think you start with a tome, and trying to distill it down to the simple has been quite a challenge. And it's good to hear that for you that we've achieved that. Obviously, we worked as colleagues for quite a long time at Respect when you worked at Respect, and so I think you've probably particularly got some views on the Centre for Excellence and what it takes to bring together good practice, the evidence base, and all that kind of goes with what those responses look like. And I just wondered, we all know that funding is a crazy challenge in this type of work. What do you think the must-do things are that we should consider as we develop a Centre for Excellence?
Thank you. In no particular order, I think one of the first things that is vital about a must-do is that you must work in collaboration. So to be the champion is vitally important, and that idea of aggregating wisdom is really important. I also think that we need to be clear about what works. It's a phrase that gets thrown around frequently, and sometimes what is looked for is outcomes, is traffic, a volume of numbers through a piece of work, rather than a genuine impact of that piece of work. And I think that what I looked at when I thought about the Centre of Excellence is that you have an opportunity to encourage all of us to focus on impact rather than outcomes. This is about creating meaningful and sustainable change across society, addressing male violence against women in a place where we should feel safe, and yet we don't. But this is not a problem of individuals. This is a structural problem that is of the system and is systemic. Individual perpetrators swim within a sea of social norms that makes their behaviour acceptable until it reaches a certain level. So for me, what is also on the must-do list is to address all forms of perpetration, not just that which has reached a certain threshold. So early intervention, prevention, mechanisms for challenging individuals who are not yet reaching criminal justice thresholds. We are not going to police our way out of this problem anytime soon, not just because we don't have the resources, but also because if we were to criminalise every form of harmful behaviour, the whole of society would grind to a halt. So our Centre of Excellence must be amplifying new norms, new ways of doing things that simply do not tolerate that low-level, trivial misogyny, which is often seen as acceptable, as just banter, as just one of those things. So for me, the Centre of Excellence has a big job on its hands, and I look forward to working with you on it. And the last bit I would say is that it needs to be a collaboration of respect, of specialist support services, bringing in survivors' voices, but also of academics. And in terms of academia, I would highlight that using the Research Integrity Framework, which was developed by the 4 Women's Aid Federations, as a way of saying, how do we do this work and focus on the right things, and also ensure that we do no harm, which I know is something that Respect has always valued. So I would always do a bit of a plug for ethical research and using the Research Integrity Framework when undertaking new research. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I found that that framework really inspirational and helpful, actually. And I think it is the kind of thing that we want the Centre for Excellence to focus on, to be able to spell out what good looks like and what bad looks like as well, in terms of how we put responses together, how we undertake research. I'm going to move on, Andrea, to ask you a question about our influence work. And I think one of the things that Respect has always tried to do is to work closely with the survivor and wider violence against women and girls sector as an equal partner. And we had really helpful feedback from you and loads of colleagues across the sector while we were developing the strategy. So I just wondered what you would want to see over the next 5 years to make sure we maintain those strong relationships, that we work to keep perpetration at the top of discussion, but also ways to ensure that everyone can be safe and free from harm, about how we get that balance right and how we kind of move forward as partners.
Well, I'm obviously in the company very experienced voices on perpetrator work, and I recognise and the sector recognises your expertise in this area. We know how important it is to have accredited perpetrator schemes, so completely necessary if we're going to centre survivors in intervention. So your contribution to that is really important and will continue to be for the work of this sector. I think the Respect standard is designed in a way where you've highlighted the need for survivors and their children to be centred. I know that you have a particular section on survivor support provision, which is helping to make sure that it's part of providing a service to perpetrators, is ensuring that they're not contributing to the harm experienced by survivors or escalating the risks from perpetrators, and that work needs to be delivered alongside support for survivors by specialist organisations, which Sarah's already emphasised is vital. And the work of the specialist sector is integral to that focusing and centering of prevention and early intervention and addressing re-victimisation. Some of the most effective solutions are coming from community-based specialist organisations, which are already in these spaces doing innovative work. And it's vital that in the next 5 years we continue to recognise and signpost to and deal with the need to build the capacity of our specialists, BINFOR, Black and minoritised and marginalised women's organisations who are so uniquely placed to be able to reach and relied on by Black and minoritised women and girls. I think showing that support and solidarity for the need to ensure we have ring-fence funding provision and better resourcing of our sector is important. But when you say, how can we continue to do that work well together? I think we've already got so many examples of how that's happening. And most recently, you've been one of the partners of 70 organisations that came together to produce a manifesto for political parties, because we are coming into a period where there will be an election and we published a joint manifesto which is setting out a whole society approach to ending VAWG, and part of that focuses on what we need to do to address prevention, but also how we need to move forward in terms of work around perpetrators, and our collective participation and being able to present a manifesto for policymakers and politicians has been fantastic, because it showed that kind of united and coordinated way that we can work to make sure that every part of society is involved in the tackling of violence against women and girls. Because what has Sarah already mentioned happened is much of the policy making is in the criminal justice system space, and we're talking about prevention being absolutely key to reducing prevalence, and that includes responses to perpetrators and addressing those social norms which underline and continue to drive domestic abuse and other forms of VAWG. So I think we're already doing a lot of that collective work, and going forward that would be really important, particularly at this time when there's so much that could be impacted by a change in government.
Yeah, that's really important, Andrea. I mean, I just really enjoy working with you and Sarah and sector colleagues, and I think we've come together much more over the last few years than I've seen in the past, and it's the way forward, isn't it, to put our collective pockets of expertise and fit them together and work collaboratively. It's the only way forward, really. It's at the heart of the strategy to work together, and I would say not just with the sector, but actually to work with academics, to work with people who are working in the public sector and statutory service provision, parliamentarians. It's just about how we kind of I suppose as a sector, as a kind of voluntary sector, as the violence against women and girls sector, how we pull in all those other people that have got their parts to play, and some of them don't even know that they have a part to play. It's a huge challenge, but that systems change bit of seeing everyone as potential partners, I think is really important. So I'm hoping that as we go forward, we'll work together closely, both on the Centre for Excellence, but particularly the Influence Programme. I think we are out of time for our conversation, but I'm handing back to Lee, who's going to field some questions first of all.
Thank you, Jo, and thanks so much, Sarah and Andrea. Brilliant to hear from all of you. We've got a couple of juicy questions in the Q&A, and probably time for one or two more if people have got questions they want to add in there. We'll start with one that I think Jo will agree is probably quite close to our heart at Respect. So Julie Smith says that Sarah is so right about her comments on the importance of a fully funded offer. A key issue, though, is the timescales to current funding, and how confirmations of continuation funding or further bidding always results in services not knowing if they'll be extended, and so referrals have to stop 6 months before funding ends, and services very sadly lose staff when contracts are so uncertain. So will Respect be pushing the Home Office on the significant knock-on problems this causes for commissioners, services, and those perpetrators who are seeking help?
Yeah, I could see Sarah nodding her head off there. I think I'm sure we all feel the same about this. It is so difficult to run an organisation when you don't get confirmation of funding for April till the 31st of March, which happened to us recently. It happens to our members, it happens across the sector. It's a systemic problem, I think. It's a government problem. You would like to think that whatever happens in the general election, that a new government with a 5-year term could be a bit more strategic about how it funds service provision in the voluntary sector. I think it's definitely something we'll push for. I'm sure Andrea is pushing for it via EVALT4. I mean, for some organisations, you can weather the storm and bridge across, take a punt that you think you're going to get the funding and not wrap up. But for the small organisations, some of our members are very small, particularly Buy-in-4 organisations are very small. They just can't do that. So yeah, it's a huge problem. I would say the Home Office staff that we deal with are acutely aware of it. It's a much bigger issue than individuals or the way one department works, but it's something we need to shout really loudly about. It's also something that affects, you know, local PCC funding, LGA funding, as well. And yeah, it feels like we're stuck in this endless cycle of 1 year funding, 2 year funding. If we're lucky, 3. But I don't think we've had 3 year funding from government for a really long time. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else, Sarah.
I would, if I could just add in that I think that it's really important, and I think one of the things that Respect strategy does is it says that as a centre of excellence, as a place to influence, we are the expertise, we are the equals at the table. And I think that question that is described about short-term funding, about the cliff edge of funding, actually demonstrates the value that we have at the moment. We're not seen as central, we're not seen as vital, we're not funded in a way which ensures the sustainability of specialist services, services which are absolutely vital and life-saving for survivors at a time of crisis. And that is not the first thought, it is the last thought. And that suggests we are not equals at the table. So I hope that your ambition to influence and be a centre of excellence is also about us being seen as the expertise at the table, as equal partners at the table, not those who are funded eventually from the last of the resources. This is a priority, and it has to remain a priority for whichever government takes over.
Yeah, that's really important. I think the Centre for Excellence, it's not our excellence we're talking about. It's everyone's. It's about practice expertise is not valued. It's, you know, what practitioners know is incredible, whether they're working with women, with children, with men, which, you know, wherever they are. I'm always blown away by the skill and knowledge that practitioners have, and it is not valued in the way that academic expertise is valued. And I think part of what we want through the Centre for Excellence is to really centre practice expertise, what's coming through our programmes and our members' work, and looking internationally and elsewhere, and, you know, looking at what the statutory services are doing, because there are pockets of really interesting things happening in statutory services as well. So it's about looking at where is their expertise and where is their expertise, how can we harness it, and how can we, you know, if without the evidence base, we can't make the influence work. We need to be able to demonstrate why this works, how it works, and to then ask for this really upscale of funding that is needed across the sector, across the whole sector.
Thank you, Jo. We've got 2 minutes and 2 questions. So the next is from the Faith and Forg Coalition, Elizabeth. So following the funding issue, I know this has more impact on by and for organisations. What is Respect's plan to work with communities in early prevention?
There are virtually no by and for organisations focused on perpetrator work. So I think we're starting from ground zero. And I think obviously the place to start is the Forg sector by and for organisations and working with them. We do work with some quite closely already. But in terms of practice and developing practice, we have the Drive project has a strand of work at the moment, which is looking specifically at this. It's just starting. I think Tina might be on here, but obviously you can't see her at the moment. But Tina's leading that area of work for us, Tina Patel. So if anyone wants to be put in touch with her, that work is going to be really interesting, I think. We're also looking at LGBT provision as well.
Thank you. And from our friends at Rights of Women, a good question to end on. What kind of support from the sector would help you in delivering your strategy? How can we best work with you?
That's a lovely question. Thank you, Rights of Women. I just think we it's all about us supporting each other, isn't it? It's all about us recognising each other's expertise. I think Rights of Women is a brilliant organisation. There's so many brilliant organisations in the sector. It's about us finding the space and the time to come together, I think. We say we're collaborative, and we are. That's our intention, but the amount of time we actually get to spend with each other being strategic is really small. And so I think all of us could do with carving out some time to spend with each other, to put our heads together, because we've got all the answers between us. I'm confident of that. And where we don't have the answers, we know someone who does. So yeah, I just think as a sector broadly, we need to find that time, carve it out, be selfish about it, because in the end, that space between us, whether it's at practice level, whether it's chief execs, whether it's, you know, wherever it is, that kind of having that desire and that space to work together is.
Lovely, thanks, Jo. So that just leaves me to say a massive thank you to Andrea, to Sarah, for coming along and supporting us in this strategy, to you all for being here, for taking time out of your morning to come along and support Respect and hear about our strategy. And as Jo said many times, please do get in touch with us for follow-up. We'd love to have a conversation with you about any aspect of what you've heard today. The strategy will now be live on our website where you can access it. And a reminder that the recordings and slides will be issued to everyone that's signed up. So thank you very much for coming, everyone, and we will leave it there. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.